Hello, how are you? Michael Tracy here. I wanted to draw your attention to an interesting article that appeared yesterday evening in the Daily Beast. And the article has to do with the policy that's being crafted within the Trump administration with respect to how they will handle ISIS. Hold on just a moment. I think I screwed up, which is not. Never mind. Sorry, I thought I had been on my own. I thought I had started the stream on my own YouTube account rather than the TYT Politics account, which has happened on occasion, but apparently that's not an issue now. So let me just continue unabated. So the Daily Beast article is drawn from what the reporter says are three anonymous officials within the Trump administration who have spoken about to her, the reporter, about the process of drafting this new plan to defeat ISIS. Remember, Trump, over the course of the 2016 campaign, said over and over again that one of his top priorities would be to totally defeat ISIS, and that and he would claim that the Obama administration hadn't gone far enough in its efforts to extirpate ISIS from Syria and Iraq and wherever else it may be. Recall that we are in the midst of a war, an undeclared war, an unauthorized war in two countries, Syria and Iraq, which began in August 2014 under the Obama administration and continues today. So there's been no congressional authorization for this war. The Obama administration risibly insisted that the war was authorized under the 2001 authorization for the use of military force, which is passed in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. And that argument didn't really hold any water for anybody who knew what they were talking about. But here we are, no legal basis for the military endeavor. And Trump had delegated to his Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, the task of formulating a new strategy to really go after ISIS and finally defeat them. And an initial draft of that proposal has now been circulated within the White House. And this reporter at the Daily Beast, Kimberly Dozier, has been chatting to some anonymous officials about it. And she headlines her piece, which I think is pretty jarring. Who invented Trump's ISIS plan? Obama. Trump ordered up a whole new plan to beat ISIS. Instead, he got a rough sketch that strongly resembles what was drawn up under Obama. And you should go read that article for yourself. It should probably be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt, given that it's based on the secondhand accounts of three anonymous U.S. officials. We don't know who they are. We don't know what their motives might be. We don't know a whole bevy of details as to what might have motivated them to speak to a reporter. But nevertheless, presumably this does afford us some insight into how the plan is being crafted. Trump, during the primary campaign and the general election campaign, would say kind of outlandishly bombastic things about how vigorously he was going to combat ISIS. So famously, he said he would, quote, bomb the shit out of ISIS. And he made some other kind of inflammatory remarks about not being too concerned if the families of terrorists were killed, etc. But it turns out, after all that bluster, if this report is accurate, his plan basically resembles that of Obama. And I think that's ironic for a number of reasons. One being that it speaks to an underlying continuity in U.S. foreign policy that a lot of people don't want to recognize. Because, say, if you're a member of the, quote, resistance, and it turns out that evil Trump's foreign policy stratagem is basically a continuation of Obama's, I mean, then either you're in favor of that continuity in foreign policy, or you have to, your resistance doesn't really, is ineffectual, because if you really want to, if you're annoyed about that foreign policy strategy, what you have to do is direct your resistance at the more structural dynamic which leads to such a continuity within U.S. foreign policy ranks. Because basically the same people running U.S. foreign policy were running it under Obama. There are going to be always some exceptions and some kind of, and a few, and differences at the margins. But overall, it looks like these plans are remarkably similar. The author of the piece, Kimberly Dozier, does note that, at least according to her secondhand accounts, the main changes to the anti-ISIS strategy as it exists under Trump will be that the Trump administration will presumably be less inclined to support materially so-called rebels or Syrian fighters who are overwhelmingly Al-Qaeda and ISIS and other extremist jihadist groups. So the Obama administration, with Hillary Clinton egging it along, provided massive amounts of armaments and funds to Syrian rebel groups, and they ended up, and those weapons ended up coming into the hands of jihadists and other extremists, and contributed to fueling the civil war there, such that it's now a total disaster. And according to this article, Trump is less favorably disposed toward that strategy, and he had said that repeatedly over the course of the campaign, but now it seems to be in the process of being formalized into a full-fledged strategy. And then, of course, Trump officials have indicated that Trump himself and the administration will be more inclined to partner with Russia in Syria, but the Pentagon might be resisting that to some extent, because they have sort of an ingrained aversion to any kind of partnership with Moscow. So that is about it. I mean, the reporting in this article is a tad light. And again, it's certainly not the final word on anything. You could imagine, for example, Trump being less inclined to abide by laws of war than Obama. So he might be more accepting of civilian casualties than Obama. That remains to be seen. Plenty of civilians were killed under the Obama administration's foreign policy, but Trump might diverge from that even further. We don't know. The basic takeaway from this article is that we're going to be doing the same thing that we have been doing, and if there's any difference at all, it's going to be that there's going to be less money and weapons flowing to jihadists. So the Syria policy, I think, is going to be somewhat of a mess either way. But if the one big distinction is that no longer will U.S. resources be funneled to extremist groups to subjugate their own populations. Rania Khalek, who is a journalist who has been reported on Syria, has reported on this very thing, which Wahhabism becoming imported into Syrian life, and that in turn leading to the subjugation and terrorization of Syrians who, although they don't necessarily like Assad, in fact, they probably are deadly opposed to Assad, but they end up supporting Assad just as the only viable alternative when they're faced with a choice between his tyrannical rule and the rule of these jihadi gangs who also have taken hold in parts of Syria. So there's no good solution here. Trump may end up doing things that do depart pretty dramatically from Obama, but just according to this report, again, it's preliminary, but what it seems to signify is that there's going to be a large amount of continuity there, with just some changes around the edges. And I think that should cause people to question the nature of what kind of resistance they feel they want to take part in, especially when it comes to foreign policy. The real issue there is more systemic than who happens to be occupying the Oval Office, although there can be dramatic differences from president to president. So it's a mixed bag. It's always sort of ambiguous. Anyway, go read that article for yourself and let me know what you think. And that'll do it for now. So long.